into private parking agreements. That would be something I think that the applicant would try to, if they felt that they needed to do that, present council with that as an option, and then that would be something that would be made as a conditional use that this wouldn't be entered. But the ordinance only addresses, I think, off-street parking, and it would have to be reasonable. The language is maybe like you could have now.
Do the Methodist Church, do they have enough parking spaces in their underground parking for all their people, all the units there?
Yes.
Well then, why can't the Baptist Church do the same, make a dedicated parking garage?
We don't know details really about that project.
Because that whole, I know, but I'm just saying, that sounds like, as this nice lady in green was saying, I mean, that sounds like an easy answer, is just to have them build their own parking structure. There's that whole basement of that where the bowling alley is in that church. You know, make that into the parking structure.
Thank you. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet who would like to speak?
Robin Newcomer, Grove Place. In addition to parking, per se, place to put your vehicle, there's also the fact that the streets are so narrow that lots of times when I just drive down to go out somewhere, I have to pull over into an empty parking place so somebody can come down the street and get past me. There's an awful lot of that going on right now. If all the parking places are actually parked in, I don't know where you're going to go with your car when you meet another car coming your direction. It's really very narrow.
I never even thought of that.
I see it all the time when I get on your street. I mean, you literally could be, if there's a postal vehicle or a delivery, I have to back down the street and go out some other way right now. And this is.
Try driving down Iona during the morning when the school bus, or the trash
Yeah, well,
truck
that's
is
just
there.
bad, yeah.
Who else? Anybody else?
This is just quick general. One I wondered is the making of it, I'm sorry, Jennifer Lammer, Windsor Avenue, 119. Is the making of the parking spaces available at the church space within the impervious pervious percentages, and is that something that's been considered? And in general, I know this topic for this meeting is about M1 Avenue event. Will you be talking about general zoning issues at further meetings? I'm seeing houses being constructed and seem to have no setbacks, and there seems to be a lot of activity going on right now, having huge impact on what is already a very dense little town. And I wondered if you were going to be addressing general zoning.
What we should do is we should restate just the emphasis of our conversation the other day in the gathering is that we should ask ourselves as a committee to re-ask the solicitor to look into solutions that we could have along those lines as far as a moratorium or any delay issue. Because it's, bottom line is we'd like to see something to at least delay these things so that people can digest them, be aware of them. And that was one of the thought processes as we had our gathering the other day, and I think maybe we should restate, to ask our solicitor as a committee, if the committee agrees, for ideas and possible legal means to make sure that
Talk about delayed demolition.
delay demolition and make people aware of demolition.
Public notice
The idea
within the constraints of the law.
and even the idea that came up the other day was of a designated permit for tear down. So that if you were to build something, you would be required 2 permits, one to tear down and the second permit to build, so that the tear down permit would have a waiting period attached to it or some kind of conditions, special conditions.
Sure.
You don't have to
I mean,
answer that.
I could add some general thoughts on it. First is I believe there are demolition permits that are applied for usually at the same time as construction permits. It's my understanding that the office will be alerting public when demolition permits, maybe even construction permits, I'm not sure, are being requested. That's something that's not mandated. I think that's something the office is doing as a courtesy in response to the concerns that the council and the office is hearing regarding this. So So hopefully the notification issue will be solved in the short term. As far as delaying what we can delay, we're going to have to think outside of the box. If it's any sort of moratorium on tear downs, if that's something that can be done. Generally, it could not be done. This is something that comes under the UCC, the construction code. If you don't issue a permit within 15 days for a residential, one or two residential building, it's automatically granted. And our code has that 15-day requirement. Now, whether there's something that couldn't be done after that 15-day period for matters of public safety, possibly, but at that sense, we may be delaying it for 10 days, 15 days before something's torn down. And is that something that's really helpful to just delay what could happen? So I will look into seeing if there's a long-term fix. But I think, thinking about this a lot, the issue really isn't as much as the tear downs, is what's being built in their place. And under the new form zoning code, you can still tear down buildings. But the issue is, does it prevent you from building the type of buildings that people are objecting to in the future? So in that aspect, it comes back to what's being built and the form zoning code. There were things that we even talked about back in June when you were really concerned that a house was torn down before everything started happening. We talked about maybe just getting the form zoning code passed and coming back and making fixes later. There's obviously downsides and upsides to that, but that's something that could be considered by this council that I think has more understanding, more support for it. Obviously, the downsides to that as well. But I will look into that to see if there's something that just not that can be done, but is legal. And this is the kind of aspect when you're dealing with someone purchasing a property for a lot of money and wanting to make a lot of money off of it, that they're really willing to spend a lot of money to sue the township to make sure it goes forward. So we want to make sure whatever we do is legal, or at least have a good legal argument if it's something new.
This may be a good moment to give the floor to Mayor Grady for just a public service announcement.
Everyone knows we're having a town hall on December 8th at 7 o'clock over the big auditorium. I'd like to hear your comments about what kind of town you think Narberth should be. Do you think Narberth should be all residential on the south side? Do you think it should be all commercial on the north side? There are topics which we're going to have a chance to talk about, what your reasons are for that. We're going to talk about demolitions, we're going to talk about tear downs, we're going to talk about this ordinance as well as future ordinances going. But I'm trying to find an idea about what kind of town you want to live in, what's important to you, what makes the ideal neighborhood. And council members, I trust, will be there, and developers will be there, and a large group of people will be there to talk about it. And so you have more of an opportunity. It's more informal. You're not on the clock with me in terms of what time you talk and you have a group discussion. And welcome everyone. Again, it's on December 8th, 7 o'clock in the auditorium.
And just for this evening, can you just take a few more?
Can I just answer her a second? Her first part of that question was as far as impervious coverage goes. Requirements are still necessary for impervious coverage. There is a provision in here that if you could provide enough recharge for the direct water runoff generated by the 100-year storm, that there could be impervious changes to that, which, quite frankly, the County Planning Commission thought was a little too high of a standard to meet, but obviously we want to make sure they can meet high levels of water runoff. But generally, no, the idea is we need proper buffering. They meet all the requirements that would otherwise be required under the code for any parking. So they can't just fit additional parking spaces throughout to try to meet this if it doesn't meet the code.
And frankly, some of the new buildings going on that it has nothing to do with tear downs, there seems to be very minimal setback in many of the new structures that have been built. The property is quite small, and yet the house seems to go pretty much edge to edge. I thought we had setbacks, so I don't know. We got that new zoning map. Is that a zoning plan we're still waiting to get enacted? So
All the new construction's been compliant with zoning code.
With the
current-
existing, with the current
Existing
zoning,
code,
not the
existing.
new one.
So that means we really need this new zoning code hopefully to reduce the size, I mean, in my thinking, reduce the size of the structures that are going up on these properties like crazy, because Narberth is already so dense, and all of the new constructions look enormously out of scale to our community. So,
We're looking to hit more density after that.
sorry.
You said it's so dense, but
Yes.
we're looking at more density.
Well, that's why,
That's not true.
why are we looking for that?
That's not true.
Yes.
May I, can I suggest something? And Bob, you and I talked about this. That every month you read the statement of how many permits have been given at our monthly meeting, the caucus meeting or the general meeting, and you state how much income. Would it be possible to break those permits down so the public could hear that there are 10 permits issued for new construction, 10 permits issued for anything?
I think in the
Is there a
future, in the
possibility
coming
of that,
year,
Sean?
I think those will be categorized in different ways according to what type of
Okay.
permit they are. So
Yeah,
because
I-
they'll all be in a database with fields, so we
Right.
can sort them in different ways.
Okay.
But in the past, it was all done by hand, pencil and paper.
Yeah, no, I,
Yeah.
I want to get a map out in the first quarter of 2016. Here I am making promises. First quarter of 2016, where you
Excel
can
file.
map and click on parcels and see the activity. It's real easy to do.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that we hope to make all of this information public and available really easily. You wouldn't even have to come into the Borough office to see it. You could access it online, and that's our goal in the near term. And the long term, that information, the presentation of that information becomes more sophisticated, so you can really get that information visually and as well as numeric.
And I should say too, Bob, that if council wanted to, they could direct the office, we don't need an ordinance, we don't need a resolution, to just say, hey, if there is a demolition permit, we want you to send flyers out to everyone within 500 feet of that residence.
Okay.
But that's something that can be
So
worked
let's put that-
within the
put that on
office.
the table. Oh, without even we don't need a motion of council.
No, it's just something that's,
So I think the Building and Zoning Committee would like to see that done, beginning as soon as possible. Yes. You know, anyone who hasn't spoken yet, can I just see the hands of how many more we have? Because let's take these last four. I see 4 hands, and then we'll call the meeting adjourned. Ms. Rosemary.
Rosemary McDonough, 9 Elmwood Avenue. There's just a point of clarification I want to ask that I think would serve perhaps to help some of the malaise we have in our neighborhood. There seems to be a general feeling among some members of Borough Council, of the Planning Committee, of the Planning Commission, that increased density is in and of itself a good thing, that mixed use, residential, commercial, is inherently a good thing. This seems to me to be flying in the face of what the residents say. I'd love to just poll you quickly to see, do you agree with that more density and more mixed use is inherently good, and if so, why?
I don't know that,
no,
yeah,
yeah, it's not.
I think this is something that we're trying to hear. I mean, obviously, we've got the petition. We recognize, and I don't want to speak for council, but council recognizes that there are many residences out there that just don't want an office use. And we can still have an office use on this. But if the concern is more parking, that's something that we can't do. You don't have full council here. They're still developing the issues. They still need to get recommendations from the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is appointed to give council feedback on these certain issues about what's good and what's bad, and they make up their own mind. Their job is to make recommendations. So I think that council's not in a position right now to make that decision. So we hear more about whether people are against mixed use in general.
Okay,
Whether
but I
it would
think
work
the
in the
vibe
area.
is that the residents are going one way and the leadership is going another, and I think it would make a lot of people sleep better just to have a sense that, no, we don't necessarily think
increased density is good, or we don't necessarily think mixed use is good. You know, I don't have a feeling that we're on the same page as you.
Thank you, Roseanne. And then Dave, I saw there were 4 hands initially, and then I saw Dave Berto's hand go. So,
Dave Rideau, 104 Chestnut Avenue. I mean, a lot of people talk about the parking, and that's certainly an issue. My main concern, though, is a safety standpoint of view, from what I see with the cars driving up and down the street right now. Walking back and forth from the train station, I see cars continually going through stop signs in the south side of Narberth, and you're adding more volume, more cars. It's a safety issue for me. So sure, I mean, I like the idea of parking in front of my house, but it's becoming more and more of an issue. You know, even to the point where my car was. I had another hit and run on Sunday night. I mean, my car's been hit and run 2 times now on the south side of Narberth. I lost 2 mirrors. You know, it's constant. It's just, you're just adding more volume, and it's a safety concern.
thank you, Dave. Terry?
Yes, Terry Fox, 104 Maple Avenue. I have 4 questions, and I am for residential only, and I don't want my questions about the ordinance to be interpreted as I am in favor of mixed use. That being said, under the definition of office use, I think that it's still very vague when you have terms like of similar character. And I also noticed that there were certain types of office use that was allowed under the form-based zoning code, like funeral homes, stores, small restaurant, and bed and breakfast. That's not included here. So I don't think that this ordinance does a good job of really tightening up office use. And I think it has to limit more specifically, you know, eliminate many kind of uses and also put a head count on it. And that would be really important. The second question I have is on page 4F. It says parking spaces used to reduce an existing nonconformity may be permitted in the front yard. There's all this talk about wanting to do the form-based zoning code so we don't have front yard garages or cars parking in the front yard. So I'm wondering why you would allow then front yard parking on the church. This corner is important to us. There should not be any parking allowed on that grass property at all. I mean, the church is, everybody's saying let's keep the church. It's a beautiful building. It's not going to be a beautiful building if you're tearing up the grass and you're putting 11 parking spaces there. So I don't feel that there should be any parking allowed on that church property at all. And again, I'm for residential only. I don't know what I'd like to understand on page 5C. It says under extension or expansion. That just sounds like it allows for additions onto this church property, and I'm not clear about that.
I can comment on that. Actually, that's in there already. And we wanted to make sure that they couldn't take advantage of the mixed-use aspect to apply that, which is why we amended it to say except as set forth above under subsection B.
So what, can you explain that to me? What does that mean in terms of the building is there, it has a footprint, it's existing. So does this allow for any additions onto this at all?
Well, it refers to the use specifically, that the use may be expanded or extended. I'd have to look at the ordinance completely as a whole. I mean, this is an ordinance that's A through F, and where the ordinance itself only addresses the areas that it's changing. But my initial review is that it's interpreted as a non-conforming use in the expansion of the use. So if this was a situation under the old ordinance where you had, part of the building being used as the traditional institutional use building, and part of that building was being used as residential units. Once you received the approval for the residential units, you could expand that use, the non-conforming use of the residential units, into the rest of the area, but not more than 25% of the area devoted. Obviously, we didn't want to expand commercial or office use, I should say. So we specifically put that language in there that says except as set forth under subsection B. So this is a provision there to try to keep restraints on future development in that property.
So it
But your
would-
question is, are you able to expand and add on to the building
Yes.
itself? That would be a non-conforming structure, as opposed to non-conforming use, and then they would have to, quite frankly, they probably wouldn't be allowed to do that because they'd be changing the facade of the building under this ordinance.
And going back to the use then, so it would be possible to go back to 100% residential if there was non-conforming use.
Yes.
But you would not be able to increase that 50% commercial?
That's correct.
Okay. And then, I would just like some kind of verbal acknowledgement from the planning commission, the committee, that you have heard that the majority of the residents in South Narberth are opposed to commercial, that they want residential only, and that there is another developer who has put in a bid to do, just like the Methodist Church, she would do condos in the church here. And I would just like a verbal acknowledgement of that. If we can listen to the pews of a church and how much parking would that allow, I think it seems only polite that we should be able to hear a recognition of our petitions and the recognition of the fact that there is another developer who's willing to put condos in there like she did very successfully with the Methodist. So, and somebody...
You could have stated facts about that.
Yeah, clearly, council has received the petition, and the signatures on the petition is made a record. And that was set forth in detail at the full council meeting. They've heard that. And the fact that there are these additional changes to the ordinance, I think, shows that council heard the outcries before regarding the parking issues and the limiting to the office. I think council's now hearing more that this is regarding the use issues. As far as the developer, I'm not sure if council, knows anything about that or has been able to verify that or not. If that's something that he would like to present to council more substantively, I think you'd be welcome to do that.
I do believe that that has been spoken up at several meetings, and some council members in the planning commission, I know Jim Cornwell has talked with the developer. But I thank you for saying that, so that this ordinance is the one that you worked up after you've heard parking concerns, but that you haven't really gone back to the drawing board now that you've heard about all the petitions, because that's like changing the conversation.
Well, I think that the issue is, what council will have to decide if they want to vote to approve this is, whether they want to have the office use in that building or not. At the end of the day, that's the decision that's going to have to be made. But if there's anything that can be done, I think this ordinance shows that council's listening, taking feedback from before, and trying to meet the requests of the council or of the borough.
Thank you, John.
There were two more hands. There's one here and one back there.
Hi, Karen Areza, 247 Hampton. Sean, I was happy to hear you say that all the setbacks were to code. Are all the footprints for garages in the town, that type of new construction, are those to code as well?
I'm sorry, say that again?
You know how you said all the new construction that's being done is to code in terms of the setbacks? Is all the new construction that's going on right now to code in terms of the size of the garages?
Yes.
So I pulled out the zoning ordinance the other day. It's hard for me to understand, but it looked like when it talks about garages that they should be 660 square feet. Is that correct?
That's actually under the building code that you're referring to, not the zoning code. And the building code was replaced by the UCC, I believe, in 2004. And that's what the inspections have been operating.
What was on the Narberth Borough website, it was the zoning ordinance that I pulled out. It was not the building code. And I actually called Bruce L. Cohen, who's over at Montgomery County Planning. You guys probably know him. And he told me that there's a real process that all towns have to go through, if someone has to have a variance to 660 square feet. But the way I read it to him, it was a zoning, not a building. He said that zoning is very different than the UCC, that one is for
That's correct.
the footprint and the other is for the actual structure.
If you're referring
So-
to the zoning code,
It is the
I'd like
zoning
to see
code.
that it wasn't the construction code. So I know that the
I think
definition.
I can
of-
probably pull it up, but I can show it to you after the
But I know
meeting.
that the definition under the construction code.
This is not the
defines
construction code.
Private garages limiting to 2 garages and 660 square feet. And that's what was replaced by the UCC.
So is that garage 660 square feet?
No.
So is it being
That
legally
code-
built,
That
or?
provision you're speaking of is in chapter 50, not 124. And all the contents of chapter 50 were superseded in 2004 when the borough chose to opt in to enforcing the PA Universal Construction Code. You wouldn't know that by downloading the PDF on our website because the text is still in the code and it should have been taken out and there should have been something in there that said this has been repealed by, so that this kind of confusion wouldn't have propagated, but that's what happened.
So what is this? If I come to you and I want to build a garage, what's legal for me to do? Then how will my neighbor know?
How many square feet?
Like, what can I do? What can I build?
Specific to your lot, so you'd have to.
This is not a fair question because there are lots of, you can't, it's a site-by-site purpose, whether it's a side lot, corner lot, setbacks, square footage. If you're gonna come in and you're going to build a garage, you would have to comply both with the zoning code requirements, which discuss, setbacks and square footage, but also the building code requirements, which is the Uniform Construction Code, which is what Yerke's Engineers goes out and makes sure that it's being built in conformance with the UCC code. So those are the two things that need to be done in order to build a garage. If what you're building is not in line with the zoning code, yes, you would have to seek a variance and explain to the zoning hearing board, not this council, why you should be entitled to that variance. And you need to have a hardship in order primarily to get that variance. But council and Mr. Metrick's not in a position where he can just speak broadly over every provision that would be under the code.
So that homeowner did not need a variance. What you're saying, it sounds like, is that his
Are you
property,
referring to?
the corner of, what is it, Price and Essex? It's the planning commissioner guys, or
Sure, a
that
couple
guy's
things
house.
with that. Council has addressed that previously. Unfortunately, there have been legal assertions made against council about pursuing legal actions against council in that matter that have yet to be resolved. So I would have to advise council, Mr. Metrick, to not give details to that because of that ongoing legal accusations that were made against council to be used against them in that matter. But I think it's fair to say that that there was an application for that garage submitted to Mr. Martin, who is the zoning officer. At the time, he reviewed the plans, and he believed that the plans were in agreement with the zoning code. Granted the permits for the garage based upon his interpretation, which is the zoning officer's job to interpret the code and the projects. And then it was then inspected by Yerke's to make sure that it was being built in accordance with the UCC, and it was also being built in accordance with the UCC. I think it's also safe to say that council hears that residents don't like the current zoning code and what you're able to do under the current zoning code, which is why, again, it comes back to the need for the form-based code, and maybe some of those changes could be regulated.
So I saw one more hand, Michelle.
I just want to say, really, I know everyone wants to leave. Michelle Penanopoulos, 125 Marion Avenue. And I just feel like I should speak up because so many people on the south side where I live have spoken against mixed use or any kind of office or any kind of increase in density. And I actually signed a petition because the petitioners informed me that